I always knew I didn't belong. Not really. Not in the Wallace family, not in their world of champagne brunches, legacy wealth, and whispered expectations. But I tried. For 6 years, I tried so hard. So when I planned Catherine Wallace's 75th birthday week in Florence, yes, Florence, I poured every ounce of my experience, energy, and dignity into it. I'd organized events for Fortune 500 CEOs, celebrities, even 2 governors. But this was personal. I thought if I got everything right, every flower arrangement, every seating chart, every bottle of Barolo, they would finally see me, not just as Ethan's wife, but as one of them. The night of the final dinner, the grand event at a rooftop restaurant overlooking the Arno River, I arrived early. As always. The view was breathtaking. The lights of Florence shimmered below us, and inside the table was set for 12. Wait, 12. I checked again. I'd confirmed 13 guests. My fingers stiffened as I reached for the place cards. Catherine, Richard, Ethan, Melissa, Thomas. Everyone was there, except me. I looked around for a staff member, thinking it was a simple oversight, but then I saw the seating chart Catherine had emailed the restaurant. 12 names, mine not among them. I stood there, staring at that table, my heart pounding in my ears. When the others arrived, Ethan walked up beside me, looked at the table, and chuckled. Oops, guess we miscounted. The rest of the family laughed. Melissa smirked. Catherine smiled with that thin, practiced grace that always made me feel like a guest at my own wedding. And that was the moment. Not when I saw the missing seat. Not even when Ethan laughed. It was when I looked into every face at that table and realized no one was surprised. Because this was not a mistake. It was a decision. I guess I'm not family, I said calmly. My voice didn't shake, though something inside me cracked wide open. And then I turned around and walked out of the restaurant, leaving behind the chair that was never meant for me. What they didn't know, what no one knew, was that I had planned for more than a birthday. I had planned for a reckoning. And it was just beginning. I met Ethan Wallace at a gala in Manhattan, one I had planned for a nonprofit fighting childhood hunger. He was charming, well-dressed, and had that effortless confidence of a man who'd never stood in line for anything. What drew me in wasn't just his smile. It was the way he listened, really listened when I talked about my work. He said, "Most people think parties just happen, but I see the way you control the room without ever stepping into the spotlight. That's power." It felt different. Like maybe I didn't have to keep proving myself every second. We started dating. Slowly at first, bi-coastal romance, LA to New York, long weekends, video calls. Then, more seriously, he flew in for my birthday, he sent flowers to my office, my staff swooned, my mother cried the first time she met him. Finally, she whispered, someone who sees you. I was 30, successful, independent, but I still wanted love, family, belonging. Ethan gave me a glimpse of all that. The first time I met his parents, Richard and Catherine, was over brunch at their brownstone in the Upper East Side. Catherine wore pearls and a beige cashmere set. She greeted me with air kisses and asked if my parents were still in catering. I corrected her. My parents had run a small neighborhood diner in Pasadena for 30 years. Ah, she smiled. That's so humble. It stung. But I let it go. I was used to subtle slights. That's what being a woman in business teaches you. Smile, swallow, move on. Richard was warmer, kind, even, but mostly quiet. Their daughter Melissa, on the other hand, made it clear I was the outsider. Oh, she said after finding out I had no Ivy League background. But you're self-made. That's very in vogue right now. Still, Ethan held my hand under the table. He defended me when Melissa made a snide comment about vendor wives. I told myself love would bridge the gap between our worlds. 11 months later, Ethan proposed. A sunset picnic on the beach in Malibu. Simple. Honest. Romantic. But when we started planning the wedding, the fairy tale began to crack. Catherine wanted it in Newport, I wanted it in Big Sur. She vetoed the menu. questioned every guest on my side, suggested I rethink my dress. Still, I tried to please everyone. I used my own company to plan the wedding, absorbing the stress, keeping it flawless. People said it was the wedding of the year. I just remember my feet bleeding and heels I didn't want, smiling through a speech Catherine wrote for me to read. After the wedding, things didn't get better. They got more subtle. At first, it was little things, being left out of group chats, last-minute family-only trips. Then it grew. Catherine inviting Ethan to events without telling me, Melissa calling my business cute, Richard asking if I'd thought about scaling back now that I was married. They never said it out loud, but I could feel it. I was accepted only as long as I stayed useful and silent. And Ethan? He stopped noticing. Or maybe he chose not to. He said, "They're just old-fashioned, you know how they are." It did, and I knew how I was too. I just forgot, for a while. But the woman they thought would disappear quietly? She was already waking up. The beginning of the end didn't come with a fight. It came quietly, like a hairline crack in porcelain, invisible at first. Then one day, everything shatters. It started with money, or rather, the way it stopped moving. The vendors I had worked with for years started emailing me, gently asking about delayed payments for Catherine's birthday week. Florists, caterers, even the yacht charter in Tuscany. I had submitted every invoice to the Wallace family office, like always. But this time weeks went by. Nothing. I asked Ethan. He said, "Just a glitch. Our accountant is being overly cautious with international transfers." He smiled when he said it, but his eyes didn't. Something was off. So I looked. Not through his phone. I'd never done that, even when the late nights and sudden meetings started piling up. No, it was his laptop, left open on the kitchen island, as if daring me. I shouldn't have looked. But I did. The browser had several tabs open. One was a login page for a Swiss bank. Another, an email thread with the family lawyer. The subject line, Contingency Divorce Planning, Q3 Timeline. I felt like the wind had been knocked out of me. I clicked. There it was. Draft divorce documents, dated 2 months earlier. And then the final punch, a script. An actual written script for how Ethan would announce our mutual decision to separate at Catherine's birthday dinner. He would say, "Grace and I have decided to part ways with love and respect, and we wanted to share this as a family." I was supposed to sit there and smile through it. Then, Ethan's phone lit up on the counter. I never touched his phone. I wish I hadn't that day. The message preview read, "Lauren M., can't wait to see you in Florence. Have you told her yet?" I stared at the screen. My hands moved without permission. I opened the thread. It was all there. Months of texts with Lauren Monroe, the woman Ethan dated in college, the one Catherine once called his true match. Dinner plans, weekend trips, laughing at my obsession with party details. And the final message that broke me. "I'll tell her after the birthday dinner. Just want to keep things clean. The baby doesn't need stress." The baby. Their baby. 4 months along. I took screenshots of everything, forwarded them to my email, then deleted the trail from his phone. I stood in my own kitchen, breathing like I'd just run a marathon. But I didn't cry. Not then. Instead, I picked up my planner, checked the catering contracts, double-checked the cancellation clauses. Then I walked into the bathroom where Ethan was shaving and smiled. "You packed the chargers, right?" I asked. He looked up at me in the mirror and nodded. We were flying to Florence the next morning. And I had a plan. Florence welcomed us like a dream. Sunlight spilling across cobblestone streets, church bells echoing through narrow alleys, everything soaked in beauty and history. It should have felt romantic, magical, but I was hollow inside. We arrived in a convoy of black cars I'd arranged through my vendor contacts. Chauffeurs, welcome baskets, personalized itineraries. The Wallace family barely noticed. Catherine stepped out of the car, squinting at the hotel. "I thought we requested something more classic," she said, as if the 5-star palazzo wasn't enough. I smiled, bit my tongue, nodded politely. This was how it had always been. I planned perfection, they responded with critique. Inside, the staff at Hotel Longarno greeted us with champagne and soft Italian jazz. I watched as the Wallaces glided through the lobby like royalty, completely unaware that their entire empire was teetering on the edge. And I was holding the thread. Every suite had been chosen personally by me. Every dinner reservation, every spa appointment, every detail had my signature. But I was still invisible to them. Later that evening, the welcome dinner took place at a charming trattoria I'd reserved months in advance. Except something had changed. The seating chart, approved and finalized, was suddenly rearranged. I found myself seated at the far end of the table, 3 chairs away from Ethan, next to an aunt who asked if I still dabbled in party planning, or if I was retiring now that I married up. I smiled, took a sip of wine, said nothing. Catherine gave a short toast. "To family," she said, raising her glass. "And to knowing your place in it." Everyone laughed. I didn't. The next morning, the family outing to the Uffizi Gallery somehow became a private breakfast that I wasn't invited to. Melissa casually mentioned it later. "Oh, I figured you'd be busy finalizing the flower orders," she said. By day 3, the pattern was obvious. Private excursions, secret whispers, group photos I wasn't asked to be in. And Ethan? He became harder to read, distracted, always checking his phone, never meeting my eyes. But I kept smiling, working, arranging, observing, until opportunity knocked. Ethan rushed out one morning, late for a quick coffee with Tomas. He left his leather briefcase behind. Open. Inside, documents. Legal. Financial. Familiar logos from offshore banks and Wall Street firms. One page was unmistakable. A letter of intent to liquidate Wallace Holdings assets, signed and dated. My pulse quickened. I took photos. Every page, carefully, quietly. That night, while Catherine beamed in the candlelight of yet another overpriced dinner, I made excuses to return to the hotel suite. I scanned emails, exported PDF attachments. I found messages between Catherine and their lawyer discussing timing Grace's exit to align with reputation management. My name was no longer Grace Whitman. They'd reduced me to a liability. That's when something shifted in me. A kind of cold clarity. This wasn't about love anymore. This was business, survival. And I was done playing nice. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. But this wasn't revenge, not exactly. It was reclamation, of time, of dignity, of the years I had spent walking on eggshells in heels they approved of. The morning of Catherine's birthday, I woke up early. Not out of excitement, but with purpose. Ethan was still asleep, breathing evenly beside me. I looked at him, really looked, and felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness, just clarity. I slipped out of bed and went down to the hotel's business center with a latte in one hand and my planner in the other. The Wi-Fi was slow. The printer made a noise like it hadn't been used in weeks. Still, I worked. Final confirmation emails, payment reversals, contract terminations. Everything perfectly timed, neatly documented. I'd spent years building a reputation for seamless execution. Now I was using that skill set for my own liberation. Around 10 a.m., I returned to our suite to find Ethan on the phone on the balcony, speaking in hushed tones. When I walked in, he quickly ended the call. "Last-minute investment updates," he said, not meeting my eyes. "Of course," I replied. "We should probably start getting ready for the gallery tour." But I knew he wouldn't go. They'd find an excuse. Like always. Instead, I used the time to visit the venue for tonight's dinner. Aurum Farenze, one of the most exclusive rooftops in the city. I greeted Marco, the maitre d', reviewed the seating chart one last time, and confirmed our arrangement. "Yes, Ms. Whitman," Marco said. 12 seats. Confirmed. The account is under your company, per usual. "Perfect," I said. That afternoon, back at the hotel, I passed by the concierge desk on my way to my room. Then I heard her. "Catherine." She was standing behind the desk, speaking into her phone with that clipped, rehearsed tone that made her sound like a society MC rather than a human being. "There will be 12 seats, not 13, she said. Yes, the seating chart I sent is final. She won't be staying for dinner. It's a family matter. No need for questions. I froze. No panic, just steel settling into my spine. This wasn't just a petty insult. It was the final move in a plan they'd been writing for months. A performance, staged in front of guests, wait staff, and friends. To humiliate me. To make me disappear. Gracefully, I went upstairs, closed the door, sat down on the bed, and let myself feel it. The betrayal. The loneliness. The exhaustion of trying to earn a seat at a table where no one ever intended to make space for me. Then I stood up, took a deep breath, and began making calls. Not to cry for help, to take control. I arrived at Orem Firenze 1 hour early, as any good planner would. The sunset bathed the rooftop in gold, the table was set, candles flickered. Catherine's favorite roses, white, no scent, lined the center. The place settings were perfect. 12. I adjusted a crooked name card, then stood back and breathed. This would be the last Wallace event I ever touched. Back at the hotel, I changed into the midnight Jew gown I'd packed for the occasion. Simple, elegant, powerful. No one would say I didn't look the part. I joined the family in the lobby as planned. Catherine gave me an air kiss and complimented my dress. Melissa nodded, tight-lipped. Ethan barely looked at me. On the short drive to the restaurant, the conversation floated over my head. Wineries, auction gossip, old friends in Rome. Not a single word directed at me. The elevator doors opened to reveal a rooftop bathed in candlelight and quiet music. The staff greeted us with practiced warmth. Catherine beamed. Everyone moved to the table. I walked slowly behind Ethan. He pulled out a chair for himself. I reached the table and froze. There was no seat for me. No place card, no plate. Just space. It was real. I heard Catherine's voice, faux surprise coating her words like frosting on poison. Oh dear, did we forget someone? My voice was calm, but it sliced through the air like a blade. Seems I'm not family. Everything stopped. No one moved. 12 faces stared at me, some stunned, some smirking, some already reaching for their wine. Ethan stood halfway, as if about to say something, but I beat him to it. I'll see myself out. And I turned, walked away, past the candles, the music, the table I had designed. In the elevator, I finally exhaled. My hands shook, but only slightly. I wasn't broken. I was done pretending. At a small cafe across the street, I ordered an espresso, pulled out my phone, and got to work. First, an email to Marco, the maitre d'. Attached. Authorization for cancellation. Payment reversal instructions. Proof of account ownership. Then came the calls. The vineyard tour for tomorrow. Cancelled. The yacht for the Amalfi weekend. Cancelled. The villa in Tuscany. Refunded. Everything I had booked on behalf of the Wallaces, through my company, gone in under 30 minutes. By the time the first course was served upstairs, their entire celebration was unraveling. And I hadn't raised my voice once. 28 minutes after I left the table, I returned to Orem Firenze. Not through the front entrance, but the staff hallway I had memorized during my earlier walkthrough. Marco, the maitre d', was waiting near the kitchen, just as we'd arranged. Are you certain, Miss Whitman? He asked, his voice low. I'm sure, I said, handing him the sealed envelope. Inside were documents, payment reversal confirmations, proof of my company's ownership of every reservation, every service, every deposit. The Wallace family will need to provide their own method of payment going forward, I told him. He nodded, solemn. I will handle it with discretion. I checked my phone one last time. Another message from Ethan. Call me, please, this is getting out of control. I didn't reply. Instead, I whispered to Marco, Give it 5 minutes, I want to watch. He led me to a discreet corner near the service entrance. From there, I had a perfect view of the Wallace table. They were on the second course now, champagne still flowing, laughter echoing under the stars. They had no idea the ground beneath them was about to shift. Marco approached the table with 2 senior staff members. He leaned down and spoke to Richard first. I watched his face change, from casual amusement to visible confusion, then tension. Catherine's smile faltered as she watched her husband reach for his wallet. Ethan looked at his phone, again. Then everything began to unravel. Marco shook his head, gently but firmly. The tablet in his hand displayed the cancellation. Richard gestured wildly, then stood. Catherine whispered something urgent to Ethan. Melissa leaned over, whispering frantically to her husband. Thomas looked pale. And Ethan, he finally stepped away from the table and called me. I let it ring once, then picked up. His voice was tight with panic. Grace, what the hell are you doing? Seems I'm not responsible for family celebrations anymore, I said. You've made your point, okay, but this is humiliating. You mean like being excluded from my own husband's family dinner? He was silent for a beat. I can explain everything, the divorce, Lauren, the baby, just come back. No, Ethan, I said, steady. Now you get to explain. To your family, to your guests, to the vendors, to your board members. I hung up. Then I stepped out from the shadows. 12 heads turned, faces pale, forks frozen in midair. Catherine stood, her voice trembled, not with sadness, but fury. How dare you? I smiled, calm, measured. I learned from the best. I didn't wait for Catherine's reply. There was nothing more to say. I turned, walked away from the Wallace table one last time, this time not with shame but with peace. At the elevator, I declined another call from Ethan. He texted next. You've made your point. But please, let's talk. It's not just about us anymore. It never was just about us. It was about me. Finding my voice. Reclaiming the story they tried to write for me. The next morning, I checked out of the hotel and flew back to Boston. First class? Paid with points I earned planning the Wallace vacations. The irony tasted sweet. 2 days later, I sent all financial documents, messages, and screenshots to my lawyer. We filed for divorce under grounds of fraud and concealment of assets. The Wallace family didn't fight me. They couldn't. Not with what I had. Not with the scandal already beginning to circulate in Boston's financial circles. Within weeks, quiet headlines began to appear. Wallace Holdings under review. Insiders cite financial irregularities. Catherine was removed from 2 charity boards. Melissa lost a partnership offer. Ethan tried to save the company, but investors weren't buying it, literally. He showed up at my apartment one rainy afternoon, looking smaller somehow. No driver, no coat, just him. We can settle, he said. Name your price. But that's the thing he never understood. I never wanted their money. I wanted my freedom. And I had it. The divorce finalized quietly. I kept everything that was mine. My business, my name, my integrity. 6 months later, I planned a celebrity wedding on the Amalfi Coast. As I stood on a sunlit terrace, clipboard in hand, the ocean stretching endlessly beyond me, I realized something. I didn't need a seat at their table. I had built my own, and it was more beautiful than anything they could have offered.